a couple things in that that are important is one, there needs to be a business plan with the right expectation when you start these things out. Because again, people go in and say, well, why don't we have any new clients yet? And so forth. And so if you don't set that right expectation up front, that it's going to take 18 months. Yeah. You know, we're going to test it on a couple clients. We're going to test it on these certain teams. And then we should start seeing, once we put marketing and sales in place and make that concerted effort a change. The other thing people should hear in this, other accounting firms that are listening or corporate departments that have been trying to make change as well, is you're not alone. The data shows it. This is an issue that everyone faces, but the only way to get over it is to actually make that commitment and make sure you've got the right people in place to support it and champion it. And I would say in a third area, that it takes an entrepreneurial mindset. And so many times we want a checklist because this is, you know, the way our profession is really driven, right? Like we live on checklists and deadlines and so forth, but this is the time to get creative and really step back to think about, how do we innovate what we're doing? Not just do it the same way we've always done, but think about, if we have this technology in place, if we were to deliver this a little bit different, what would it look like? And that's a little bit different of a mindset than we're typically used to.
Yeah, and there's two things I want to build off of that, which were some of the other findings that ladder right with what you just said. First was, because again, we're measuring all the different capabilities, and two of them that popped up that were very interesting when we looked at the uniqueness of each one was innovation and also technology. And when you think about it, it's not necessarily that shocking, but it turns out that every day that passes, those two get harder and harder and harder to implement. And so when you look at how the curves match, it shows that if you're going to try to do any sort of innovation, or you're going to try to actually put in technology, you're better off doing it now, because it's going to be twice as hard a year from now or 2 years. The second thing that was interesting, to your point on change management and constantly evolving the organization, is we looked at duration of time of the firm, how long it's been in existence. And what we notice is that when you're in your first 5 years, typically you set a strategy in place when you first start out, and you drive that strategy and you drive it through your marketing, you drive it through your client service and everything else. And it allows for you to grow at a pretty steady rate. But once you hit this 5-year mark, and you hit that 5 to 10-year mark of the firm, it drops. And what we did, what's that?
Complacency happens.
Complacency. And what it is the strategies you used in your first 5 years, or essentially it's every 5 years, is not the strategy that you can rely on to succeed for the next 5. And that was really interesting to see, because it wasn't just like we saw an exponential curve change. It actually dipped, which then signified you were in the situation of either you change or unfortunately you die. And that's when you start to look at that underlying pieces. So to your point, it's that constant evolution and not resting on your laurels for what you've done up until this given point, and continue to try to drive that same sort of behavior going forward.
Well, and I think what's important too, and some of those dips, depending on the size of your firm, may be that people get frustrated, right? Like they come in, they get excited, they're told you're going to have this initiative to really bring change into the firm. But then what happens is that they keep bumping up against no's. And this is the way we've always done things. And so sometimes when you see those dips in some firms, that's actually staff leaving and saying, I'm just going to do it myself. Because, you know, the difference between now and 20 years ago, starting up an accounting practice is not as hard as it used to be. Now, you still have to be a sales and marketer to get new clients and understand that. So leaving that aside, but the tools to be able to start an accounting practice, you don't necessarily have to buy one. You can be trained to get started much easier with the technology that's out there. So it's a really important data point to focus on, so that you learn how to embrace the ideas that are happening in your firm or in your department, if you're an internal corporate department, and figure out how to grow those rather than push them down.
Yeah, and you and I have both seen this over the last 3-5 years. The number one challenge in firms today is talent and talent management. And to drive your best talent out the door because you're not able to drive the change that they expect to differentiate your firm, it's doubly negative because not only do you lose great people, but you can't attract great people. And so you're already against the hardest problem that there is. To your point, it's about how do we grab onto that opportunity of change and then be able to leverage those great people that we have, reinforce the behavior, support them as they do it. Obviously, it's not an easy journey, but that will return us into having better talent coming in the door, which allows us more opportunity going forward. So it can snowball one of two different ways. Which way do you want to do it?